Hello, Nicholas Fredericks Tushau of Suriname has been elected the new chairman of the National Tushau's Council after elections were held earlier today. Here are the other major stories making today's headlines. IMF says Guyana is on track with its financial management. Big increase in rice exports reported. Berbice farmers encouraged to tap into technology. And World Population Day observed. And now for the details. We start this evening with news that Suriname's Tushau, Nicholas Fredericks, has been elected unopposed as the new chairman of the National Tushau's Council as elections were held today at the Arthur Chang Conference Center. Fredericks replaces Joel Fredericks, the former Tushau of Wayaka Mainstay Village. Paul Pierre, Tushau of Cubana, was elected vice chairman, and Russian Doric of Yupukari was elected secretary. Marbel Thomas of Campbelltown was elected treasurer. Moving on to other news, Guyana has come in for commendation from the International Monetary Fund for its prudent fiscal management of the economy ahead of first oil. Stacey Carmichael tells us more.
In a July 13 report titled IMF Executive Board concludes Article 4 consultation with Guyana, the organization said Guyana's restraint towards borrowing comes at a time when the country's medium-term prospects are very favorable. With oil production to start in 2020, the IMF said the additional oil discoveries have significantly improved the medium and long-term outlook. The IMF's observation over prudent borrowing validates concerns by the Ministry of Finance of the prospect of what is termed the pre-source curse. This involves the unrealistic expectations over anticipated oil or commodity revenues, which can create, among other issues, immediate demands for increased public sector wages or spending on infrastructure. Economic growth is projected to be 3.4% in 2018, driven by continued strength in the construction and rice sectors and a recovery in gold mining. The IMF advises that Guyana relies as much as possible on multilateral development banks, including their non-concessional financing operations. Development of the domestic capital markets would provide a more stable source of financing and help meet the needs of domestic long-term institutional investors. The report recommended that private external borrowing should continue to be avoided and central bank financing should not be used at all. The IMF also forecasts that the current account deficit is projected to narrow to 6.1 and 4.3% of gross domestic product, GDP, in 2018 and 2019 respectively. The deficit will be financed largely by foreign direct investment or FDI inflows and donor-supported investment. The central government deficit is projected to widen to 5.4 and 5.1% of GDP in 2018 and 2019 due to the cost of restructuring the sugar sector and an increase in infrastructure-related capital expenditure. While public debt is projected to rise in the short term, it is forecast to decline with the onset of oil production. For InfoHub, Stacey Carmichael.
Thank you, Stacey. More good news from the rice sector as exports in the first half of this year have jumped up by 43%, earning the country over $23 billion. Here's that report.
Information from the Guyana Rice Development Board notes the sharp increase of rice export when compared to last year. First quarter results from January to June show export volume was 290,000 tons compared to 203,000 tons during the same period last year. The increase in export earned the country $23.2 billion. General Manager of the GRDB, Nizam Hassan, attributed the increase to an aggressive position by rice producers and millers to get production. Access to new markets, particularly Mexico and Cuba, are also accredited to the increase in rice exports. Prime Minister Moses Nagamootoo facilitated access to the Mexico market, while the GRDB reported an increase of supply to the Cuba market. From January to June alone, more than 87,980 tons of paddy were exported to Mexico. In 2018, Guyana exported a total of 202,000 tons of rice to Latin America, as compared to 2017, which had 64,000 tons, an increase of up to 215%. For InfoHub, Tiffany Rogers.
Speaking at the EU CELAC Foreign Ministers meeting in Brussels, Vice President Carl Greenidge said states have a collective responsibility to protect the planet. Here is Tiffany Rogers.
Minister Greenidge reminded states they have a collective responsibility to protect the planet. Minister Greenidge noted shared actions by individual countries do not match responsibility. He explained it is often the owners of resources who bear the cost of protecting the environment. Established in 2011, the Regional Forum CELAC provides a platform for 33 countries within Latin America and the Caribbean to exchange dialogue and collaborate on political agreements. On the sideline of the meeting, which was held from July 16 to 17, the EU High Representative for Foreign and Security Policy, Federica Mogherini, and CARIFORUM Ministers of Foreign Affairs met. The EU announced a €74 million support package to respond to the reconstruction efforts of Cuba, Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, who were most affected by the hurricanes Irma and Maria. The response package is a direct follow-up of the pledge made by the EU at the UN CARICOM Pledging Conference of November in 2017. Both sides looked forward to the launch of negotiations between the EU and the African, Caribbean and Pacific Group of States, ACP, on the post-Cotonou Agreement, took note of the respective negotiating mandates and underlined their commitment to a framework that allows for the further development of joint partnerships. For InfoHub, Tiffany Rogers.
Minister of Natural Resources Raphael Trotman has committed officers from the GGMC and GFC to address complaints by Indigenous leaders during the National Tushhouse Conference.
Last evening, Minister Trotman heard the Indigenous leaders' concerns in relation to mining and logging. Indigenous leaders raised a number of concerns in relation to mining on titled lands. Minister Trotman committed personnel from the GGMC and Forestry Commission to address these complaints during the remainder of the conference.
And we are going to be treating this matter mockery very, very, very seriously. And emphasize and overemphasize the word very. We've all now realized, perhaps too late, but not late enough, that we have to address it. And government is taking action.
Acting GGMC Commissioner Newell Dennison committed to investigate the complaints.
We have not had a policy, and certainly have not been practicing, giving out blocks, permissions, permits for mining in titled lands. So where you have issues with existing permits in titled lands, the research has to be done to determine when those title lands were made titles and when the blocks were issued.
The Ministry of Natural Resources and the National Tushhouse Council are drafting a memorandum of understanding to improve their relationship to better address concerns by Indigenous people. For InfoHub, Tiffany Rogers.
Minister of Citizenship Winston Felix has responded to a Kaiser News article describing it as wholly fallacious and unsubstantiated account which suggests that he was attempting to avoid investigation into what appears to be unaccounted numbers of migrants in the country. Here are some excerpts from the minister's statement. However, the full statement can be viewed on our website at dpi.gov.gy. Thanks for staying with us. The Guyana Police Force, GPF, is appealing for the public's assistance in recapturing 2 remaining escapees from the Camp Street and Lusignan prisons in July last year. Kabina Stevens, also known as OJ, and Paul Goraya are wanted for escaping from lawful custody. Anyone with information is asked to report to the nearest police station or call 911 or 225-222-7. Minister of Public Security Kemaraj Ramchatan has assured that government will provide resources to those in the fight against trafficking in persons.
Some do it for body parts, which is the worst extreme. Some do it for labor practices, some for sexual exploitation and all of that. But it is still slavery. It is still repugnant and appalling. We don't want that to happen to our mothers and sisters, do we? So then we must not allow it to happen to other people's children.
Minister Ramjatan earlier today opened a 2-day training course in trafficking in persons for the Corps of Wardens attached to the Ministry of Natural Resources. He urged the participants to never compromise on the principles of law, even if the perpetrators are their relatives and friends. The minister said it is important that everything is done to ensure the recently achieved Tier 1 status is maintained and sustained for a long time.
When we took government, we were in what is called a Tier 2 watch list, which is right down there in relation to trafficking in humans. Because of the work the ministry and other ministries and members of the task force that we formed have done, it has helped us now from Tier 3, which is watch list Tier 2, we then improved to watch list 2, and today we are Tier 1.
Task Force member Neil Bacchus outlined the training course's aim.
To equip local stakeholders with information regarding the nature of the crime of trafficking in persons, function of the task force, services available locally, how to identify, assist and refer victims, and best practices for detecting trafficking in person. 2, to create a network of exchange of information among frontline officers and other stakeholders in different regions of Guyana who may come in contact with potential cases of trafficking in persons. And 3, garner information to make a task force more effective and efficient in its operation.
This workshop follows earlier training for wardens and other stakeholders by the Ministerial Task Force on Trafficking in Persons chaired by Minister Ramjatan. For InfoHub, Anara Khan.
And in our final report, World Population Day was observed today, and access to safe family planning practices and sexual reproductive health were underscored. Delicia Haynes has the details.
First Lady Sandra Granger said access to family planning services and education is a human right. Yet 214 million women and girls in developing countries like Guyana are denied this.
It has been estimated that if the need for modern contraception was met, there would be 70% less unintended pregnancies, 74% less unsafe abortions, 25% less maternal deaths, and there would be an increase in educational opportunities for girls and women, greater participation by women and girls in the labor force, and an increase in their earning potential.
Minister within the Ministry of Public Health, Dr. Karen Cummins, noted that family planning and education has now been made available to adolescents at various health facilities countrywide.
Sex education assists families by teaching the youth how their reproductive systems function and how to use contraceptives. In addition, sex education teaches the youth the truth about pregnancy and birth control. No longer you can tell children now babies coming from airplanes. Natural family planning techniques teach women and their sexual partners how to chart fertility cycles.
2 members of the Women Across Differences group who were teenage mothers shared their stories. They spoke of the importance of family planning and sex education.
Parents, this is 2018. You cannot no longer tell a teenager don't have sex, or pay a blind eye to what your children are capable of doing. What you can do is teach them, educate them to protect themselves. Teach them they have a right to protect their body and to plan their future.
I was so eager, I started to share the good news. I started to do condom distribution in the streets. I would normally go to the minibus and share the condoms. I found the joy in doing this good deed, and I'll continue to do it.
The role parents play in educating both boys and girls on the things pertaining to human and family life, teaching them to be responsible for their bodies and their sexual and reproductive health, was also highlighted. The theme for this year's World Population Day is Family Planning is a Human Right. For InfoHub, Delicia Haynes.
We leave you with your bridge and weather reports and scenes from 2 receptions held for the NTC conference delegates. The first held by President David Granger and the second held by Prime Minister Moses Nagamutu. Goodbye.